Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm really happy for you to get to know today Linzy Bonham. And Lindsay also has a podcast, and I'm going to give her a chance to talk about that. But Lindsay, as I start with everyone, tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Yeah, so I am based in Ontario, as we chatted about before we started recording. So I'm a Canadian social worker by training, turned financial coach, therapist, educator for therapists. So I was a trauma therapist in private practice, loved that work. But when I stepped into private practice, found that nobody was talking about money, and I was so hungry and eager, and I was like, "Wait, where's the information on how I save the right amount for taxes and how I file my receipts?" I came into private practice really hungry for that information and found it just wasn't out there. So off the side of my desk as a complex trauma therapist, I started helping my colleagues with the financial part of their practice. And then eventually I built my course, Money Skills for Therapists, in 2018. And since 2020, that is what I've been doing full time. I've stopped being a therapist. I am retired, which is always fun to say when
Mhm.
you are well below retirement age. And now I focus entirely on helping therapists in private practice and group practice owners with the financial side of running a practice.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's a big move. And I know I've had conversations with other folks that have, kind of left the therapy world or not left it completely. Usually there's a tie to it in some way. But
Hmm.
yeah, maybe we could chat about that. But I know one of the big things that we wanted to try to tackle today is just our money mindset and how it can really affect us as therapists and particularly in private practice. And I know people have heard from me on this podcast just a little bit more about that. But tell us kind of your take on kind of our money mindset and just what you've learned in the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, when I started teaching finances to therapists in 2018, I my initial thought was that I needed to teach them spreadsheets, which is true. We do need to learn spreadsheets. But what I very quickly discovered, Gordon, is like in the way of being able to learn these financial skills and to develop the financial literacy are all of these stories and emotions and experiences, all this programming that we have that makes it really hard to learn. So what I have found with therapists is the mindset pieces around money, our emotional relationship to it can be so strong, so negative that they actually interfere with our ability to learn and function in the financial space. So you end up with therapists who are so smart, they might have PhDs, they've done so much to earn their licenses, they do incredibly complex therapy work. They're brilliant people who go into a shutdown when they try to think about how much they need to save for taxes, right? And go into these more basically trauma kind of responses around money because money is so loaded and so stressful. So,
Hmm.
there's many, many reasons for this, and we can dig into that. But I do find that a therapist who does not have a lot of stress and baggage around money is a rare creature.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
There's a few layers to it. I think that part of it is that, generally speaking, as therapists, we are accidental business owners. We go into private practice because we want to be able to like serve our folks in our way. I know that's why I went to private practice. I was getting out of
Hmm.
somewhere, getting out of an agency culture that I was like, this place is killing me. I can't stay here. I wanted to be able to serve the people I wanted to work with in my own way. And then in doing so, I had a business all of a sudden. So
Right.
generally speaking, therapists are not people who, read business books in advance, have an MBA as well. Some of them exist, but they're very rare. We usually end up accidentally owning businesses, which means we have no education in this area, right? And there's a general lack of education and conversation about money in our society in general, right? Very
Right.
few of us get actual purposeful financial education from our parents. We don't learn this in elementary school, we don't learn this in high school. And then you go into your professional training, whatever niche of therapy, whatever zone you're in, we don't get training there either. So we actually end up in an area where we're completely ill equipped. We have no training, and then we're expected to know how money works. So that's part of it. But then the
Hmm.
other layer on top of that lack of education is all the negative messages that we get about money as kind of helper healer type people, as therapists, as, that person who's always been taking care of everyone around us as it is. So I generally find most therapists, my theory is that most therapists have been practicing therapy long before they were licensed. We were usually like that person, in the corner of the party talking to somebody about their relationship with their dad. Like the first time I was called a
Mm-hmm.
therapist, I was 12 years old. My friend at the time said like, "Oh, you're my therapist." And I was like, I remember thinking that's bad. I don't think that's how
Mm-hmm.
friendship is supposed to be. But usually we've been giving away these services for free for our whole
Right.
lives before we go into the
Mm-hmm.
field. So
Yeah.
also we have already had the experience of doing this for free, giving too much of ourselves, being overly sacrificing. And then we step into having this as part of the way that we are earning money. And suddenly we have to start valuing it and attaching a dollar amount to it. And that's a huge leap that we have to make.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Right.
stories that have to be undone to be able to do that work.
Right, right. And I think one myth that, I know I had to overcome early on in my career is the just thinking about if I if I receive money for what I'm doing for someone, then am I really helping? And I think that's just a
Hmm.
total myth. And
Yes.
I was sharing with Lindsay before we started recording. I consider myself a recovering people pleaser. And that's been a focus of my own therapy here lately. But
Hmm.
yeah, and I think it can be misplaced, and I think that it can kind of really hold us back in being successful, and really kind of can stifle our ability to truly help people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean that people pleasing element is huge. And then I would say even layered on top of that too, we then get additional stories about money that we inherit from our families, right? So
Yes.
rarely have I met somebody who's like, "Yes, my parents were very clear and purposeful in how they taught us about money and they taught us all these skills." And usually what we've inherited from family is observations that we've made. There's this saying that children are excellent observers, lousy interpreters, right? So we see something happening, we make meaning of it. We hear the phrases that our parents say around money, like money doesn't grow on trees, or we don't have the money for that, or we see our parents' behaviors of acting like the
Mm-hmm.
family has no money and then suddenly going out and spending a ton of money. And we also get this whole bag of baggage, a whole
Mm-hmm.
suitcase, if you will, of baggage from our families too, that is then layered on top of this lack of education and this natural caregiving, self-sacrificing way. And then you
Right.
can throw in identity factors in there too about, women and what they're supposed to earn. For a person of color, are you supposed to earn money? Like all these other messages. We've all got just like a whole tangle of stories that we're dealing with,
Right.
many of which are often contradictory but
Right.
still run us under the surface.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a yeah, I was just reflecting as you were mentioning that just one of the messages I kind of received from my family was is that to get money it was more about luck or good fortune or if you had money it was maybe that it was you were to be shamed in some way or that
Mhm.
sort of thing. And so,
Mhm.
and that's something that yeah, we all have to kind of look at and overcome.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many layers to these stories, Gordon, that
Mm-hmm.
they come up to years into doing your money work. A new story surfaces in a new way, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
you have changed and suddenly you are that person who's earning a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so these stories come up suddenly in this new way because it's like, oh, now I am that person that my family
Yeah.
judged, right? And
Right.
then often too, we're also navigating relationships with families or partners who then have their own stories too. So as you change your money story, how does your family react to that? How do your friends react to
Right.
you starting to maybe earn more money, not be ashamed about money, charge more? I remember
Mm-hmm.
when I raised my fee to $150 an hour, having a
Mm-hmm.
friend whose face was just pure judgment, right? Like they could
Yeah.
not disguise when I told them my new fee that they were just kind of appalled, right? And
Right.
then you have to kind of hold your own,
Uh-huh.
against other people's money stories too.
Right, right. Yeah, and in your work with other therapists around money and really kind of getting their head around it, where do you see that people have, or maybe I'm trying to think how to ask this question. Where do you see that people really begin to be transformed when they change a mindset of
Mm.
some sort?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the mindset piece. in the work that I do with folks in my course around this money skills for therapists, we start with that first, right? And what I find with those different money stories is some of them shift fairly easily. Once we identify them, we're like, oh, that's my dad's story. That's not my story. I don't want to believe that.
Mhm.
And some of these stories we can let go of fairly quickly. And others are like more deeply lodged in, our nervous systems or our psyches, however, whatever language you want to use to think about it. And so what I have found is with overcoming these stories, there is a blend of a little bit of awareness goes a long way, fake it till you make it, raise your fee and realize that people don't actually scream at you. You're not actually like run out of town. Everything's actually fine. Your clients say, good
Mhm.
for you. I've been wondering when you're going to raise your fee. Let yourself have these new experiences. But then there's the kind of third box of money stories that actually require therapy, right? And that are
Mhm.
much more deeply embedded and,
Mhm.
that we need to take to trauma therapy and that we need to approach with, I think, respect and
Mhm.
compassion and gentleness. And so what I find is we all carry kind of each of these three boxes in us. So as people start to do the work, there's some things that start to shift quickly and they have fast relief. There's other things that they have to work on kind of over time that gradually they're
Mhm.
unwinding. And then there's that second category of like, yeah, I've actually been charging my new fee for a long time, or hey, look at me, I'm like putting money away for taxes. Maybe I am somebody
Mhm.
who can save enough for taxes. So it
Yeah.
really is this gradual transformation. And sometimes people get that fast relief of you let go of something that feels terrible and you're like, I feel 100 pounds lighter right away.
Right.
And then other times there's like those things that linger. So it really is like self work. And, I
Yeah.
think comes with all of the complexities and self setbacks and ups and downs that
Mhm.
healing has, right? Healing is not linear.
Right, right. You know what? One of the areas I know that was transformational for me early on in my move into private practice, which I'm not going to state how long that is, Ben, but one of the things was really understanding the concept of return on investment. And that I think a lot of us probably grew up with a scarcity mindset around money, and that, okay, if I pay money for this, then I'll no longer have that money. And
Yeah.
that, it's just money is lost by putting it into that. And so many
Hmm.
times I hear from people, oh, it's just too expensive,
Yeah.
or I can't afford that.
Yes.
And I think a big shift is being able to recognize, no, you can't afford not to do
Yes.
some of these things. So
Yes.
you want to say more about that kind of way of thinking?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the return on investment is a really important concept because I think also, too, again, when we haven't had education around business, we might be used to thinking about money more in that like personal consumer way, and we might
Hmm.
have heard the messages from our parents of like, well, if we spend that here, we don't have that there, which is true, right? But when you are in a business, you are building a machine that can generate more money, right? And
Hmm.
part of making that machine work well is we need to invest in it, right? We need to put money in. We need to create great marketing so that our right fit clients can find us, right? So with return on investment, something that I actually have developed a tool around this, which I do workshops with sometimes because it's such a huge topic. I see two parts to return on investment. One is that emotional piece, and one is the actual numbers. And this is generally how I approach money overall, Gordon,
Hmm.
because it's like if we don't do the emotional piece first, there's so much noise there that sometimes it's hard to know. So when I walk through folks the process of thinking about return on investment, the first thing that we do is get clear on the emotions that are there, right? As you're thinking about this investment, like what's coming up for you? What's driving you to think about making this investment? Do you want to invest in this course because your friend is doing it and you'd like to do it with her, but the timing's actually kind of bad for you, right? Do you want to invest in this person because they're kind of pressuring you and you just want to please them? Like just really slowing down to notice what's there. Do you want to invest in this because it's something you've known you need to do for a really long time, right? And it's strategic. Does it align with what you actually need to do in your business? So letting yourself name the emotions that are there for you, the kind of external factors, what kind of pressures are coming from outside. So like internal pressures are from inside, external pressures from the outside. And then, is this really what you need in your business right now?
Hmm.
Sometimes it's not, but sometimes it really is, right? So if it is
Right.
something that you're like, no, this is a problem I've been needing to solve for a long time. This is a container that makes sense for me. Either like this is a coach that I like, or this is a way of learning that works for me, or this is a kind of service that I know I've succeeded with in the past. If it's all a go, then you can think about actual numbers, right? So,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to spend. $2,000 on this new website, let's say. If that website helps me to attract my I keep saying, I'm so sorry,
Mhm. Right.
right fit clients.
Yeah.
If this website helps me to attract my right fit clients, and let's say reasonably having a really great, wonderful website that's SEO optimized, puts me on the first page, gets me 10 new clients that I wouldn't before. What is the value of those clients to me over the course of a year? Right. And then how much am I actually paying for that? What is the return on investment? If I get,
Hmm.
if a client is worth $2,000 for me in a year, I get 10 of those. Now I'm talking about $20,000. I've paid 2,000 for this website. I just got a 10 times return on investment. I put in 2,000,
Hmm.
I got back 20 that I wouldn't have recently got. Now you can do
Hmm.
actual math, right? But
Right.
usually I find that as therapists, we need to like ground in the emotions. And as you mentioned, like if you start to think about, okay, I really want to invest in this thing, but I don't have enough money, slow down. It's like, is that a story that you have a lot? Is that what you always heard your mom say when you had to make an
Hmm.
investment? Like when the family had to make a financial decision? Then again, you can name, okay, there's that scarcity. If I let the scarcity step aside, is this an investment that actually makes sense for my business? Right
Right.
now, you can start to approach it from like what in IFS they would call more of like your core self, like wise mind, choose your modality, however you want to think
Yeah.
about it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
now you're making a balanced, grounded decision rather than just going into those knee jerk old money stories that are not strategic and are not going to help you in
Right.
your business.
Right, right. I think one of the aha moments I had early on when I started into private practice as a solo practitioner before I started my group practice was investing in something as simple as Psychology Today directory.
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't know if I read it or what but this is just a really simple, basic example. If I pay $30 a month for this directory assistant and I get just one client from that, it more than pays for itself.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. And so being able to think about things in that way,
Yes.
and I think even, kind of as I like to say, a low-hanging fruit for people, and this is really more people that are maybe solo practitioners that are looking to scale and looking to kind of go to the next level, is hiring an assistant of
Oh
some
gosh,
sort.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that is, well, I can't afford that. Can't afford but you have to really look at, okay, what are you losing by not hiring an assistant?
That is one of the ones I see folks have the biggest blocks around.
Hmm.
I see this all the time, including with group practice owners who have several folks working for them, who have just an insane amount of admin work. And my general take on an administrator is you can't afford not to.
Hmm.
Administrators are worth their weight in gold, like a good
Hmm.
VA, a good admin. And, a simple equation on that one is just if you're paying an admin $20 an hour and your fee is $160 an hour, it's like you work 1 hour and you can pay them for 8 hours of work.
Hmm.
Right. So if we think
Hmm.
about just that simple equation again of like, trading your time for money, they're doing 8 hours of work. And honestly, they're probably going to do it better than you
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
possibly faster than you. You see one more client, and now there's 8 hours of stuff that's been taken care of in your practice that you don't have to do. That is
Hmm.
immensely valuable.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it frees you up to see more clients.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
instead of spending, half a day returning phone calls
Hmm.
or trying to track people down and sending, intake stuff. And yeah, absolutely worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think,
Yeah.
I wonder if part of the barrier to that, as I think about why is that so hard for therapists? I think therapists often we are the helper. We want to help
Hmm.
others. We're not used to being helped. Right. And I think there's probably
Right.
various flavors of that, whether it's that we
Hmm.
think we don't deserve help, whether we think we're a failure. If we're getting help, we should be able to do it ourselves, like that hyper independence. But
Hmm.
I do see that that is a common block that therapists tend to have, I think, just because of the type of people we tend to be.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, I think what goes along with that, and this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I know we had talked about it a little bit before we started recording, is recognizing when we need to be very clear about, particularly in a group practice, about our expectations of the
Hmm.
people that are working for us
Yes.
because we want to be nice, we want to be
Yes.
kind, all of those kinds of things. But a lot of times we just have to say, okay, this is how it's got to be done.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And I see this with my group practice owners that I work with, and I know you do too, where the caretaking that maybe used to be about clients, where it's like, oh, well, I can't charge them that much money. They can't afford it. Da-da. Often when we get through that level, and now we're
Hmm.
charging a fee that, it is a worthwhile fee for us. We've overcome
Hmm.
that. Then we bring on a team, and then we just start doing the caretaking all over again. But now we do it with our
Right.
team members instead of clients. So it's like new level, new devil.
Hmm.
Here's this pattern
Hmm.
again that's going to show up in a new, different way. And I see that happen all the time with group practice owners.
Yeah. Yeah. So in kind of keeping with that thought, in your work with group practice owners, how do you help them work around talking with their staff about money and
Hmm.
the importance of all of that?
Yeah. Well, the concept that's at the core of my group practice course, which is Money Skills for Group Practice Owners, is the concept of financial leadership. So it's showing up as the leader you want to be, values aligned, staying connected to why you started this practice, who you serve, what are the values that the practice is upholding, balancing that with having financial clarity and literacy and being grounded in the numbers so the practice is sustainable. Because what I see with group practices so often is they are so tenuous. The numbers are not working, right? So they're like
Hmm.
maybe doing really well on serving people, taking care of people. They've built a great community and they're funding payroll from their personal bank account, right? So we have to
Yes.
balance these things. So in terms of
Hmm.
those conversations with team, what I find group practice owners need to have first is they need to have grounding and clarity around what are the boundaries? What are the expectations? What
Hmm.
is that drop dead line that I absolutely need you to work 12 hours a week? Right? Because
Yeah.
they know now what it means if they go below it. One of the things that I have in that course is a tool, we call it team tool. And it allows you to
Hmm.
look at each of your positions and understand, is this position profitable for your business? Is there money left behind from this role at the end of the month? Or is this role actually losing money for your
Right.
business? And once group
Right.
practice owners see that, that can give them the grounding and clarity to start to have those clarifying conversations with their team of like, hey, our agreement was that you're seeing 10 people, you're seeing seven. I
Hmm.
need you to see at least 10 as per our agreement. And if you
Hmm.
start seeing 15, here's this incentive, to get you
Right.
up to the 15 level. Right. But
Right.
what my folks talk about is just when you have that actual clarity with the numbers, you can have those conversations with such confidence because you're not guessing. You're not kind of
Right.
going by feelings of like, it feels like you should be seeing more clients. It feels
Yeah.
like you shouldn't be taking so much vacation. Instead, you can give them actual numbers and guidance and like clear as kind, right? When we can set clear expectations,
Hmm.
we are allowing people to actually step up and meet them or to let us know, you know what? I actually don't have the capacity to do this role and I'm going
Yeah.
to move on to somewhere else.
Right.
Right. We can
And
actually, sometimes that ends up resulting in goodbyes, but usually they're goodbyes that needed to happen like a year ago.
right. Right. Yeah. And one of the mistakes I made early on in my practice was, particularly after I started my group practice, was paying my people too much. And I know I've had this conversation. You're probably familiar with Julie Harris at
Of
Green Oak
course.
Accounting and her
Yes.
book Profit First for Therapists. And in fact, I think she does. She quotes me and uses this as one of the case examples in her book, where I was actually paying I just picked up a random number. I said,
Hmm.
"Oh, I'm going to pay my therapist X amount. This
Hmm.
seems fair. This seems generous, that kind
Hmm.
of thing."
Hmm.
But the longer I did it, I really recognized, okay, I'm having trouble making payroll and I'm
Yeah.
having to pay them out of what I produce
Yes.
in order to make what I was paying them. And it was really doing them a disservice because it wasn't sustainable. And,
No.
I ended up losing a few people, but also it caused me to shift from being a contractor based system to an employee based system. And all the difference in the world and being able to, it was actually more profitable for me. And they actually ended up making more money in the long
Yes.
run too,
Yes.
because I've changed the way I did things. So
Hmm.
yeah. So you want to say maybe a little bit about that as well, Lindsay, just
Yeah.
about,
That fee split. Yes.
yeah.
That
Hmm.
is, I find the classic mistake that group practice owners make to start is they pay their team too much. And it comes from all the right places, right? It's like they've had
Mm-hmm.
their own bad experience of feeling exploited in a group. They've seen people getting underpaid. They want to be that good boss. They want to do it differently, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
so many of these choices come from just like the goodness of our hearts and reflect the fact that we're great people and we should be leaders. We should be in business,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we are actually thinking about the well-being of our team. But I have almost never seen it where the first split or waged offer is actually sustainable.
Right.
It's the tendency is to overgive. And you use the
Mm-hmm.
word generous, and it makes me think about how, we can be generous when we're stable, right? We can be generous when things
Yes.
are sustainable because
Yes.
then there's actually enough, right? When there's
Mm-hmm.
enough, we can give some more, right? But when we
Right.
start off by being generous, when we're kind of like pouring from an empty cup, as you
Mm-hmm.
say, we're actually creating it so that there's this unsustainability, which does trickle down to your team, right? Like that affects
Yes.
how you can show up as a leader. You know that like you're 1 week away from not being able to pay everybody and having to shut the doors. There's no way
Mm-hmm.
that is not impacting your team and the quality of service and your
Right.
ability to show up for them.
Yeah.
So, we can absolutely be generous, but only once we've built a machine that actually works well
Right.
and is going to run for the long term.
Right. And it creates a whole atmosphere and a whole culture of scarcity
Yes,
when you're doing that. And so
absolutely.
that's, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Lindsay, I got to be respectful of your time. And I know we could probably spend all day talking about these things. Tell folks maybe some parting thoughts on this and how they can get in touch with you and talk about your podcast as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, going back to where we started with money shame, why therapists are so shamed, the biggest thing folks can do once you recognize that you have stuff around money is like start to connect with people around you. Like we know that shame, doesn't withstand the light of day. You think you're the only
Mm-hmm.
one who feels this way. I can tell you as somebody who's worked with thousands of therapists that you are absolutely not. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
getting that connection, like getting into resources like mine, you're already listening to Gordon's podcast, which is great, right? So like getting exposure to people talking about money in open, honest ways, but also starting to have your own conversations with colleagues and friends starts to shift that shame, right? And allows you to start to heal and grow and change around money. So to that end, I have my podcast, the Money Skills for Therapists podcast, that folks are welcome to check out, where we talk about the practical and emotional sides of money. I have coaching conversations on there where I coach listeners or graduates from my
Mm-hmm.
program about money, which is really powerful. And then I also have a masterclass called the 4-Step Framework to Getting Your Private Practice Finances in Order, where you can learn more about my approach and what I do, and Money Skills for Therapists, which is my course for solo practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you get your invite to that course as well. So moneynutsandbolts.com is my website. So if you go there, you'll see my courses, the group practice, the solo, you'll see the masterclass, you'll see the podcast, and just immerse yourself in this. Let the silence around this start to fall away. It
Right.
feels so much better when money is not a burden.
Right, right. Yeah. And we'll have links in the show notes and show summary for all of this. And Lindsay, I'm so glad we connected and hopefully get you back on here before too long.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Gordon.